Hey everyone, we're just going to do kind of a short little video today, and what I want to talk about is two kind of heavy hitter computer RPGs from the very early days, and that would be Ultima and Wizardry. And specifically I want to talk about the collections of these games that came out in the late 1990s. So we have the Altima Collection, and that was actually the first 8 games in the series, including some add-ons and the speech pack for the 8th part. And then we had the Wizardry archives, and that came in 1998, and that had the first 7 games plus Wizardry Gold. But these came out, and obviously if they came out in the late 90s, they were really meant for Windows operating systems. So what we want to look at, and what I want to look at in this video here is, can retro computer enthusiasts play these games on these collections on old period hardware that these games actually came out and were meant for? So the first thing we're going to talk about is price. I mean, obviously these are pretty good values. It can be, some of the games, even the older ones, aren't too expensive, but like, let's say the first original Ultima games, complete in the box, they're pretty rare and expensive. So these collections, even though some of them are expensive, I know Wizardry Archives it's over $100 now, I believe. I remember getting it new back, I think, at Electronics Boutique at the mall back when those actually existed and stocked completely with computer games, but I digress. That's gotten expensive. Ultima Collection isn't that expensive. You can still find it sub $50, but I actually found a copy for $2 sealed at a thrift store lately, but that's beside the point. It's still, overall, they still make kind of a better value, and you get a lot of bang for your buck. You get a lot of good classic, mainstream. If you have any interest in old school CRPGs, these collections really are a must. But the thing is, they come on CD-ROM, and they were meant really sort of targeted for people running Windows. So we have to ask ourselves, can we get these games to run on vintage era hardware, if you're into that sort of thing? And the question is resoundingly yes. So then we want to look at how do you get these games off the CD-ROM and onto your retro machine. Now, a lot of these, the early games, like, the early Wizardries, probably 1 through 3 at least, maybe 4 and 5. The early Ultimas, at least 1 through 3, maybe 4, were really meant for a 4.77 megahertz 8088 machine. So obviously those are probably not going to have CD-ROM drives installed. They're going to have 8-bit buses, 8-bit slots on them. So how are you going to get that over to them? And secondly, how are you going to play? These are really meant for hard drives. So the first thing I got to say, if you want to play them on the vintage hardware of the era, you need to have a hard drive installed. There's various ways to do that. That's not going to be the point of this video. But there are 8-bit. Usually MFM drives are really abundant, and lots of those are in 8-bit. There's also, IDE 8-bit IDE controllers. 286 machines have 16-bit slots. Those are going to be way easier to get IDE hard drives working on. And those are fairly exciting. I mean, some of the games might run a little fast, but they'll work. So, first of all, how are we going to get the files over? And there's many ways to do that. You can use network connections. You can use a parallel port 1.44 megabyte floppy drive, zip drives if you have a NEC V20 or higher. I use the most common method, probably because this is the method most people will be using. That would be a 720 kilobyte floppy drive. I've never run across an 8-bit floppy controller that didn't or was unable to see a 720 kilobyte floppy. So we're going to assume you have a 720 kilobyte floppy drive. Now, you don't need an actual 720 kilobyte floppy drive. You can actually use a 1.44 megabyte drive, which is much more abundant. And if you install them in these systems, they will be seen as 720 kilobyte drives. The thing is, you have to prepare and format the disks. You can use a 1.44 megabyte disk. You just put a piece of tape. I use black electrical tape. You just cover up the hole, and that's pretty much it. After that, you just have to format it to 720 kilobyte. Windows 98 and 95 is really the best way to do it, because you can kind of do that directly in the operating system easily. For Windows XP, you have to use a command line prompt. Windows 7, I believe, I've read that same command line prompt works. I've had horrible luck with floppy drives in Windows 7. The disks always come out corrupted. Maybe that's just my luck. I know other people have been able to do it. Windows 8 and 10, I have no clue. But some of these games, like the Ultimas, some of the later ones may require you to split the files up onto multiple disks. That's fine. But then, you just make a file on your retro computer. For instance, for Wizardry, I called mine Wiz1, and then you just use the copy command, and you just copy your files over. So specifically, I'm going to talk about Wizardry first in the Wizardry archives. These are all pretty much straight. Of course, they'll run, every one of these games should run fine on their respective era hardware. So far, I've played the first Wizardry, and I'm probably like 10 plus hours into it, and I've had no trouble with this game on my 8088 machine. It runs fine. It's a little sluggish, but I mean, it's supposed to be, it takes a minute to draw the dungeons and the lines, even though it's a real simple game. But that's pretty much how it is. It's supposed to be. I've tried turbo mode, which is like 10 megahertz, and it doesn't seem to really speed up the drawing of the dungeons anywhere, but it does make the little displays go a little too fast. You found this treasure and the battle, it's just too fast. You can't read what's being displayed. So I really recommend a 4.77 megahertz 8088 for the early Wizardries from the archives. Unfortunately, you can't play the Wizardry games directly from disk, as they originally came in. They have been modified, officially modified, and you have to install them on the hard drive or a hard drive to work. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty slick. It kind of automatically goes through and bypasses those areas that ask you to swap disks, because it was originally a PC booter game. You didn't even need DOS. It just came on a floppy disk, and you just put it in, start up the computer, and it'd boot up. Really, having it from a hard drive is really, even though it's not 100% original, it's quite a boon. I wouldn't trust 20 plus hours of gameplay on an old floppy disk. I wouldn't even trust playing the game from a floppy disk. When I buy retro PC games, I just assume the floppy disk is dead or going to be corrupt. It's just best to get that information backed up and on a hard drive anyway. So it's actually really cool that these games now can be played off a hard drive. So that's all for the Wizardry archives. There's really just, after you transfer them, you don't have to do anything else. You just transfer the files directly. And Wizardry 1, I haven't played the other ones yet extensively, but I just made a file on my 8088 hard drive. It's a 32 megabyte hard drive. I just Wiz1 copied the 3 files. It's like Wiz1 for the first Wizardry, for example, it's like Wiz1.com, save1.com, and there's some other file. And I just transferred those into the file, and that's it. Then you just hit, Wiz1, enter, and it plays. So now we're going to go into the Altima Collection. And these are all also direct DOS versions. It's pretty much the same thing. You just copy them to a file. But the one thing I do want to talk about the Ultima games is the fan upgrade patches. Some people have been wondering, can you play the upgrade patches with the original games on the original hardware? And the answer to that also is resoundingly yes. I have done it. I've done it with Wizardry 2 and 3. Those are the 2 examples of the games that really can use the upgrade patches. The first one, I just copied over directly, same method, it worked just fine. I played that game actually on a V30 system that's a little bit closer to the speed of a 286. It was running at 8 megahertz on a V30, and that game ran fine. These games, again, the early ones, I'm mostly talking about the very early games here, are really meant to be played on a 4.77 megahertz 8088. Now, what the fan patches are, basically, they kind of upgrade, they fix some bugs, and they upgrade the graphics from CGA to EGA. So, a little bit of history here. The first Ultima game, actually, the DOS port didn't come out until 1986, and it was an EGA. Now, this is kind of weird because Ultima 2 and Ultima 3, and I even believe Ultima 4, came out before Ultima 1 on PC for DOS. So you get this weird situation where if you're playing in an order, you play the first game, and it looks pretty good for a game that came out in like 1981, I think. And then you go to the second game, and it's like it's such a backward step. It's such a downgrade. It's like, ugh. And even on its own, especially the second game, just looks horrible in CGA. They used a really terrible color palette, and it's horrible. The other interesting thing, the second game, all the versions that come on CD, like in the Ultima Collection game, it's actually unbeatable. Something about how they copied over the files from the floppy version, and they overwrote certain map files, and the second one's actually unbeatable as is. So what the upgrade patches do, these are fan-made, they're not official, but they upgrade. For the second one, for example, they upgrade the graphics to EGA, which is a little bit more in line with the first game, and they fix the bugs, and they actually make the game beatable. If you're playing on original hardware from the period, you're probably looking for that original experience anyways, so it's kind of weird to recommend an upgrade patch, since if you're playing on an 8088, you want to get that experience. But I think in these situations, seeing as the first game, especially if you're playing in order, since the first game came out in DOS, in EGA, I really would recommend the patches, especially with the second game. You actually need it to beat the game. But anyway, I'll have a link below in the description to the archives that actually have these patches. But yes, you apply the patch prior, and then you put the games on disk, and then you transfer them, and they work just fine. Thing is, it does add a little bit of overhead on your processor, so I would recommend a little bit of a boost up. They run a little too slow on a 8088. I played the Ultima 2 with the fan patch in EGA mode, and I played that on the V30 running at 8 or 10 megahertz. I don't quite remember. And it ran fine. Now, the patch for Ultima 3 is really cool. It has a lot of different video mode. It has emulated color composite. It has EGA. It has VGA. I played it in EGA just kind of, that's the closest to originally. I didn't want to go overboard with VGA, because then it would cause the same situation. I'm playing the game in EGA, and then I'm going to play, it's just, but anyways, for that more authentic feel, I would really suggest you play the third game in EGA mode, but to each his own. That was originally a CGA game, but, again, like the second game, a horrible color palette, it just looks really bad, especially when you played the first game in EGA. So the one really cool thing about the Ultima 3 fan patch is it adds music. And the original DOS port didn't have music. Obviously, PC sound cards were not big, and when it came out, which I think was like 1982 or 83, so there's really no point in adding sound. But what the patch does, it actually adds MIDI and sound from the Commodore 64 version, and I believe the Apple II version. So these aren't like fan-made music. This is from actual games that came out at the time, just on different computer systems, but now you're getting them for the PC. So it makes the PC version with the fan patch kind of the definitive version, which is cool. It does add quite a bit of overhead, it seems, to the third game. It just ran too slow on my V30 system. I had to play it on a 286. I had a 20 megahertz 286. I have a turbo button that downclocks it to 10 megahertz, so I've been playing it on a 10 megahertz 286. And it runs just fine at that speed. But yeah, I would recommend like a low speed 286 if you're using the fan patch for the third game. But yes, it does run on original hardware. So yeah, it's just kind of cool that you can actually play these games, even from, you have the stability of a CD, you have them all collected together, probably, even a lower price than collecting every game individually, especially for, the Ultimas. And you have them all in this reliable CD, but you also have the option to transfer them to actual retro PC machines for, be period correct when these games actually came out. And it's pretty cool. It is pretty cool that, the patches actually work on these retro machines, even if you have to kind of step it up with the power level a little bit. But yeah, it's a really good alternative. It's a good compromise for us retro PC gamers that kind of want the real deal experience on real hardware, but you don't want to go too all out just for, just for reliability's sake, really. So that's a short little filler video for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helped some of you out. And thanks again. If you liked the video, please subscribe. Keep watching. I've got more stuff in the pipeline heading your way. So thanks a lot for listening.